Game begin.
Welcome to Spike Colony with the number one deck designer in the world, special guest Sam Black, and I am Lanny Huang, the number two deck designer in the world. And
I don't know if that's slipped. I'm not sure if it slipped because of
and I'm here with Michael J.
Sam's
Flores.
Distance increased last week. If there was a 1-2, he was like, 1-2 by 15 feet. Now it's 1-2 by 15 miles. That's generous to you.
Joining the two best deck designers in the world is a deck designer and the chooser of deck designers in the world, Michael J. Flores. Sam, welcome to Spike Colony. I just want to share that this is an exciting call for me. I have three Magic the Gathering heroes. They are Michael J. Flores, Gabriel Nassif, and Samuel H. Black. So this is an absolute pleasure. And wow, what a day. Land tax is banned. But first, how are you doing?
I'm good. Did you see if Nassif was available?
I've been trying to, I drop into Nassif's stream every now and then. I'm just like, hey, so Premodern.
Did you like Nassif before or after we played? Because, Sam, you might not know this story, but when Lanny and I met, we played in a PTQ, and I really wanted to play Nassif's blue-red
This is 2019 Eldraine Standard.
I was just like, I had these dreams of having a Niv Mizzet in play and then putting an Embercleave on it. I'm like, my sideboard strategy is going to be 4 Niv Mizzet, 4 Embercleave. I can't lose. That's my thought process. So I call up Nassif and I'm like, Nassif, what do you think about this stuff? And Nassif looks at it and he goes, just play blue-green. That was his answer. I'm like, that's your answer? And at the time, people were like, oh, blue-green can't beat Jund. So I just figured out how to beat Jund. And so I played blue-green, and I didn't, I think I lost one game the entire PTQ, so it was super boring. But Lanny was playing Nassif's deck.
When I met Michael J. the very first time was round one of a PTQ. I was playing blue-red Flash against blue-green Flash, and Michael J. afterwards was just like, yeah, well, I messaged Nassif, and he told me even he wouldn't play blue-red Flash. And I'm just like, thank you for that.
I didn't realize that I was one of his heroes, invoking the name of one of his other heroes. But then, good guys won, bad guys died. That's how the stories are supposed to go.
Nassif has been. I've been a fan. I mean, I'll talk about my heroes. Michael J, you're my hero because I read all your articles. You had the Hawaiian T-shirt on the mothership. Nassif had that crazy run where he was just getting second place and everything right when I was starting on Magic, and I was like a Francophile as a preteen. Like I just liked France, and he was like a French player, so I just kind of latched onto him. And I was like, this guy rules. Sam, I first came into contact with your content. I think I was listening to Pro Points podcast with Sigi and PV, and I think you did the Ravnica Legends Clear the Mind 19-1 record, yeah. So that was just like the coolest thing ever. And then you kind of followed up with really showing the people how to play limited by opening up drafting archetypes and really just showing your process. And I just think that, you're one of the most creative people playing Magic. And I think approaching with an angle of creativity is just very exciting, and we all love to see it. So welcome to the cast. How are you doing?
I think it's interesting that you like Sam for creativity. I like Sam for not creativity. So I was a really bad Midnight Hunt drafter, really bad. I couldn't win at F&M, right? And then Sam just printed a spreadsheet. And then I had the highest Midnight Hunt win rate on all of Magic Arena for the next 7 seasons. I was like, all I did was copy whatever he did, and I had a 93% win rate, and I never lost ever again. And it was the boringest thing ever. Never lost.
Sam, was the spreadsheet just 17 lands data? You can tell me.
What?
It was literally just I put 17 lands data into a differently organized spreadsheet.
Yep.
But I could read Sam's thing. It's actually not true because Sam tiered them into I think there were 5 columns, and then
that was part of the organization.
Yeah, it was ordered in the columns. Yeah. So I just knew which card to draft in which order, right? Versus I tried to keep 2 screens open and look at the 17s. It's just too hard for me. I don't know how to do this.
Sam made
other formats?
the 17 land data in a printable format. He just made it so that you could print it out instead of having it on a second computer monitor, and that unlocked.
If you're alleging that if I knew how to sort a spreadsheet, that I would be good at other limited formats, there is no evidence that would possibly lead you to that direction. In my one rat test n equals 1 sort of situation, I got a spreadsheet from Sam Black. Never lost another match of Midnight Hunt, right? That's it. I wait for Midnight Hunt to be back on Quick Draft so I can get my Mythic rating back. Takes about 7 drafts. And I go about my business.
All right. So Sam has really unlocked Michael J's arena win rate. He's really unlocked all of our arena win rates. I think I, really feasted on drafting archetypes when I was making good runs in Kamigawa and Adventures in Forgotten Realms. But beyond that, every single time you show up to play Constructed, it just seems like you just see something that other people don't, and every single time you play Premodern, it just seems that land tax and scroll rack is broken. But
pause. You guys are both limited arena number 1 players.
No, that you've been exaggerating that for a long time. I peaked at like top 10, but I've never made number 1.
Oh,
I think I made one at some point for a little while.
No, you definitely did, because a bunch of my barns were like, Sam's number 1 and he kept playing. It's like if I get to like top 100, I just stop playing. Like last month I got to like 33, and then when I checked back in, I was like 98%. So I think I should have started playing again at some point. But I never play after I'm top 100.
Sure.
All right, Sam. For those who don't know, please tell us about yourself. We make a joke on this podcast that Michael J has a long list of accomplishments that you should just look up. But we would love to hear some of your favorite things about yourself, because you actually do have a long list of accomplishments. So
I once won a car.
That was your coming out tournament, right? That was New York World Championships 2007, right?
Yeah, which is a tournament that I didn't play in.
But you came to New York.
Yes.
That also has one of my favorite stories that weekend.
Oh.
But you weren't. Yeah. So I roll up Friday, and the top 8's going to get announced, right? So I'm hanging out with Herb Berholtz, and one of Lanny's heroes, Gabriel Nassif, is going to make top 8, and just my buddy Patrick Shapen's also going to make top 8, and they played the Storm Dragon deck, right? And so this is cool. And so we go to dinner, right? And a bunch of things happened at that dinner. So like Chapin and Nassif ordered wine, and like Nassif is like ordering the wine because he's French, so I guess he knows about stuff like that. At one point when the bill comes, I went to reach for my pocket. Herbert Holt smacks my hand so fast, he's like, "Don't you dare." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Those DIs just made top 8 of the Pro Tour. I don't want any implication that I should be taking my wallet out." Right? So he just, boom, he knew. I literally am great, but the great thing is, we're like 75% of the way through the dinner. Just everyone's having a great time. Two of our people at our table have just made top 8. And a young woman walks up to the table.
Oh, no.
She's like, starts talking. And she's like, I think I know you from somewhere, blah, blah, blah. And so Patrick starts eloquently going like, "Oh, yeah, well, we're here in New York City to play in the World Championships of Magic the Gathering. Gabriel and I," and he calls him Gabriel. "Gabriel and I have just made top 8. The girl looks over at me. She's like, "Are you Mike Flores?" Like in the middle of Chapin's speech. And I was just like,
This is not a real story.
Nice top 8, brothers. Oh, no. This is a well-documented real story.
I believe it.
All right. So Sam was also in New York.
Yeah.
But anyways, tell us about yourself, please.
Well, so my story from that tournament is I was there to just like play side events, because there was this thing where there were a bunch of side events that were marked room, and if you won one of them, you could play in a 32-person tournament on Sunday to win an automobile. And that sounded pretty good. So I borrowed like a red-green snow deck from someone in Standard and won some Standard tournament with it. And then I was trying to decide what I should play in this Standard tournament that won the car, because like that mattered a little bit more than the qualifier for it. And so I wasn't like very well connected at this point, but we were at Worlds, and I knew Bob Mahar because he's local, and so I talked to him, told him I qualified for this thing, and asked what he thought I should play, and he told me about how Dragonstorm was the breakout deck of Worlds, and I should definitely play it, and I thanked him for the advice and decided to play a Goblins deck that I played at States that I didn't do very well with. And I believe later Bob heard that I did that and said he hoped that I at least had Thoughtseize in my sideboard, which I did. And then I won a tournament with a bunch of unplayable limited cards. And
What happened to the car?
It was a thing that I could pick up in the future from New York, or I could take cash instead. And I had recently purchased a car, and et cetera, et cetera. I got some cash.
Nice.
So, that world's day 3 was Legacy, right? That's where all the rest of my dual lands went. I don't know who has them at this point. Just looked at cards for that day 3. Dual lands weren't worth than what they are now, apparently. Also, I didn't pay very good attention. But, Sam, you're underplaying later that year. Didn't you become like the Fairies Assassin? Like, straight up the world's Fairies Assassin? Maybe second only to PV?
Well, Akira Asahara and Yuta Takahashi were also very good with fairies. Also, I would say that when I played against Masashi Oiso in Worlds in the Fairy Mirror, he taught me some lessons, and it was very clear that he knew what was going on better than I did. But I did have a pretty good run with fairies, but that was actually just over a year later, because the next, or, well, maybe under a year. So, that was World 2007. I finished second in Nationals 2008, playing Adrian Sullivan's Green-Black Elf deck, and then started playing fairies after that sometime. I think I only played fairies in the post-rotation rather than pre-rotation fairies era. But yeah, I did end up doing reasonably with fairies later on.
Reasonably would be like a world-class reputation for anybody who's just not, I guess Elisa was better than me in the mirror.
I think we're like experiencing the two the opposite ends of the range of humility that you can have in a person, where Sam Black might be the most humble person that plays Magic, and Michael J may or may not be the least.
Sam, I'm trying to entertain our fans.
It's
sorry if that offends you.
It's a foregone conclusion that Sam's a monster. He has at least proven it in the Premodern streets, and I'd love to talk about Premodern. So. Sam Black, of course, broke the news to me that Land Tax was banned. We were about to record with him, and he messaged me on Discord, and he's like, well, guess we're probably not going to talk about my deck.
We should still talk about the deck. It's still important.
I didn't say we wouldn't talk about the deck.
Yeah, we would change topics.
There was probably a change of topics. I figured we should probably discuss the post-Land Tax era in addition to the Land Tax era.
Yeah. Okay. And this is great. So I want to set the stage here. So if you haven't been following along, Sam Black won the Misty Mountain Spring Cup with sort of what became his signature deck over the course of a few tournaments, which was a tax rack deck that just leveraged Counterspell and Foil. One was Spontaneous Generation. It was
Gush and Foil, I think.
Yeah, Gush and Foil.
And Counterspell.
Counterspell. Gush, Foil, Counterspell, Blessing, just sort of a card advantage control deck that used Tax Rack. Please don't call it Parfait. And this was just really cool because I think a lot of people assume that Sam Black spent a lot of time in the lab with this deck, and what actually happened was he built, the first iteration.
That was the first draft.
Which was no, it wasn't. Michael, you're also misled. So Sam started playing the deck sort of around last year, and then really only played it at Misty Mountain large scale tournaments. Correct?
Every now and then there'd be a physical playtest at Misty. I did a couple of those, but. I never played it. I never put it together online, and generally don't play a large number of games of Premodern.
Right. So, per your articles, it was kind of actually per all things considered with Mano, you were basically I lost to this this deck and then changed my deck so that I couldn't lose to that deck anymore. And you did that over a few tournaments and were rewarded with a win. Back here on July 1st, we had the second annual Midwest Premodern Championship hosted at Misty Mountain Games. And you decided the night before, one, everybody was going to try to defeat your deck, so you should probably not play that deck. And two, let's just have some fun and either play blue-white Tax Rack Dreadnought or play Tax Rack Anorid Brushhopper. You went with the Dreadnought deck, and you won every match that you've ever played with it. It was stunning to watch on camera. I highly suggest you watch coverage. And then your resulting attitude with this was, of course, something should go in the format. Well, something did. But so we're here now. So, I don't really want to rehash too much of what's out there. I think the question on people's minds is how'd you do it?
Actually,
what
Laney,
was like?
I actually think you jumped way too far ahead. I think we should talk about Sam's deck for a second. I'm pretty keyed into the pre-modern community, and I don't understand how the deck works.
Fair enough.
Just
Okay,
as an example.
Okay, give us.
I literally don't understand how the deck works.
Give
I
us the
understand
101.
So the deck is like Mock Simon, Land Tax, Scroll Rack, Enlightened Tutor, Swords to Plowshares, 1 Sylvan Library, 1 Oath of Druids, 1 Ivory Tower. That's like most of the engine of one of the 2 kind of monster decks of the format. Then on the other hand, it has 4 Phyrexian Dreadnought, 4 Vision Charm, 3 Stifle. And then I guess if you're Sam Black, Gush and Foil count as Parfait cards, right? But like if you're not Sam Black, they count as Stifle Knot cards. The thing that I really love about Sam's deck is the presence of Mock Simon lets him, go to the dealer the way that I do with Lotus Petal. And you've often been like, everyone would play Lotus Petal if they could draw Lotus Petal like you do, right? But Mock Simon lets Sam do that. The thing I don't get is, rather than a 4th Stifle, right, or like the 4th of a lot of things that could be in the deck, Sam just plays 1 Oath of Druids, and I don't get it, right? The only thing you could Oath for is Phyrexian Dreadnought.
Yeah.
Most decks are like, I'm going to get an Ancestors Chosen, or I'm going to get a Shard Phoenix, and I'm going to lock down the bet. You're just like...
That's why Oath decks are bad. Those creatures suck. Dreadnought's good.
All right. Sam, give us the 101s on your deck. You can, of course, read all about this on... It was Hipsters, right? That you wrote about? Yeah, so Hipsters the Coast. Sam Black has an article called Breaking Premodern. Talks about the process for building the deck. But let's go ahead and run down the quick primer.
Yeah, so, basically, I was looking... So, I bought some Dreadnoughts, largely as a hedge in case Land Tax was banned, so that I would have, a different good deck. I bought them at the same time that I bought English Legends Land Taxes. So I was like, if it's not banned, I can play nice Land Taxes. If it is banned, at least I have these Dreadnoughts. And then, I had some Dreadnoughts to play with, so I was like, I wonder what I can do with these things. And I had the idea for a blue-green Gaia's Blessing deck that would play Greater Good with Dreadnought so that you can draw 12 cards, and then play Oath so that you can Oath in to draw 12 cards. And then I put white in it because Swords to Plowshares is legal, and so I want it in all of my decks. And then I tried playing with that deck, and that deck had Petal and Diamond because I wanted to cast my Greater Goods early so that I could start drawing cards. And playing with that deck, Fast Dreadnoughts were good, Greater Good underperformed, and I had Enlightened Tutor to set up this whole Oath Greater Good Dreadnought thing, and it was clear that I wanted to be able to Enlighten Tutor for Land Tax Scroll Rack. And so I was like, all right, some of this Oath into Dreadnought stuff is actually pretty good, but a lot of this deck is just not better than the Tax Rack engine. So I should just go back to the drawing board on this one. But it served as proof of concept about Oath into Dreadnought is just a thing that works, because when you play Dreadnought with Vision Charm and Stifle, you have like more access to Vision Charm and Stifle than Dreadnought because it's just a greater number of cards, and so like you get to play Oath as your like additional Dreadnought half of the combo, and then you just like Oath into Dreadnought and keep it, and then if your opponent answers it, it's not that hard to have another blue card, and you just Oath into another Dreadnought. And then like with the Greater Good deck, I was like, oh, and if I don't have a blue card, I can just sack my Dreadnought and draw 12, and that's at least as good. And if I'm playing against Burn, then Plow is like another thing that I can do when I Oath into a Dreadnought. I can just gain 12. And so, basically I saw that, you know, Oath into Dreadnought is just a functional thing to do. And that like having Dreadnought stuff was good, and having other card wrench and stuff was worse than the engine, the tax rack engine. So then I was like looking at how to change my tax rack deck, and I was like, all right, these cards are locked in stone. How many slots does that leave me with? Not a lot. How many slots would I need for this like Dreadnought package? Oh, actually, that's about the same as the number of slots that are not locked in stone in my deck. What if I just cut all of my like non-essential like control stuff and bullets for the Dreadnought package? And I was like, okay, how does that change my like matchup spread? Well, like I lose, you know, Humility and Zurin Orb and like some anti-aggro cards, but my understanding is that most of the aggro decks are pretty bad against turn 1 or 2 Dreadnought. So I think I'm gonna like net additional percentage against calculating everyone. So I guess this is a good change. And then I was like, okay, but all of this was motivated by a desire to not lose to Landstill. And my understanding is that like I'm afraid of Landstill's ability to beat my land tax deck. And I'm afraid, and my understanding is that Landstill is supposed to be good against Dreadnought. So like, does it actually make any sense to jam 2 decks that Landstill is good against into one deck and expect that I'll magically be better against Landstill? I think the answer is actually yes, because I think that Tax Rack's problem is giving Landstill too much time, and Dreadnought's problem is being like too disruptible. And if you just have a really good card draw engine to keep threatening with them with Dreadnoughts, you probably kill them. Yeah. But that was all theory, and I was worried that it might not play out that way. So just to be sure, I put 3 Brain Freezes in my sideboard and figured I could board out my Dreadnoughts and just charm, freeze them, and I couldn't ever lose a game with that plan.
Right. And I wanted to point out that I think it's really like a lot of people had that comment. They're like, if Sam's trying to beat Landstill, why is he playing 2 decks that lose to Landstill? It's like, one of the things that happens when you have land tax in play is Landstill can't develop their mana. And one of the main ways that Landstill beats Blue-White Dreadnought is by having a mana advantage, just playing a land every turn, drawing extra cards off Landstill. So you kind of cut that off. And I guess while we're on the topic, is that kind of what played out in round 5 when you played against Alec Esser on Landstill?
Yeah, I think that's basically how it went. I don't remember any details super well, but I do remember. I also don't remember the match being particularly difficult.
Right.
Yeah, the 3 Brain Freeze seems like a pretty good way to. And you also have a Red Elemental Blast. That's cute.
Yeah. The Red Blast was great. So yeah. I think. So it came to my attention last week when I was having a discussion with a very skilled Eternal player who I won't name about. He mentioned that he like casually followed Premodern and like saw that I'd like done well, and that he plays a little bit with like a friend of his who just like proxies up a bunch of decks or something, and we were having a conversation about like, to what extent, you know, me winning with these decks is like, you know, deck versus pilot. And it's like very hard to like disentangle, but like every now and then I wonder about like why no one else plays my deck. And
I played
whether
your
people-
Gushland Still deck.
Hmm?
I played your Gushland Still deck once.
Okay.
Gush tax.
Sorry, land tax
yeah.
deck.
Yeah.
I played it.
Yeah,
I won the tournament and I beat Lanny. But those are the things that I was setting out to do.
sure.
Both of those conditions.
No, so I did a little bit of coaching with Sam in preparation for the Premodern Champs, and Sam was like, "Are you worried about my deck?" And I told him, I was like, "Look, nobody plays your deck. I don't know why, they just don't."
Against Sam's
And
deck
I was
top
rewarded.
eight?
I was rewarded by playing against Sam's deck in my win in or draw in match rather, and I guess I'll tell you about that really quick, Sam. So I played Oath Parfait, and I queued into your deck on round 8, which was the last round. I needed a draw or better to get in. My opponent couldn't draw in. So we shuffled up, and he opened on islands and tax stuff, and we played a 50-minute game 1 that didn't conclude, where neither of us had any lands in play and neither of us triggered land tax at all. It was a great moment for me because I made top 8, and I proved that I could at least not complete game 1 versus your deck. This was a problem.
I think that's the best outcome for you in that matchup.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. I do think that I at least had thought about what I was going to do in the matchup, thanks to playing against Michael at the event we played. I also played Oath Parfait into Mike, and we kind of just had some discussions about it, where he was like, "Well, Counterspell and Duress kind of like both cancel each other out, so what's going on?" And then he kind of made the misplay of playing out of Plains, which I explained to him as like, you can't pick up the Plains, but you can pick up your islands, so just don't ever play a Plains in this matchup.
I actually don't think the matchup is that bad. I mean, I certainly think that the Gush foil Counterspell version has an advantage, but I think that the advantage that I had against Lanny was mostly that I had gone first. I deployed multiple land taxes with 0 land in play before he took his first turn.
Yeah, I mean, it's super. This is one of the reasons why I actually didn't. I mean, it was complicated. It's okay that tax is banned, but one really interesting thing about that matchup really is like, okay, well, if neither player is going to trigger land tax, then both players draw 1 card a turn. Like, whose deck doing what thing is the most important? And actually, the most important part about the matchup that I played against the deck in my draw in was my opponent had Phyrexian Furnace and I did not. And so my deck was finite and his was not. But the way that I forced the draw was he had mistakenly not kept 2 blessings in his deck at all times. So he was left with 2 blessings in the yard, and I was able to duress Tormod's Crypt him and make his deck finite. And it was at that point that effectively neither of us could win.
You could have won.
Yeah, I could have. Yeah,
like,
I could.
He played like hella tentatively. Like I think the game was winnable from his side, but
he
played too tentatively.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because we didn't have enough time to finish. Yeah. But this is neither here nor there because we're talking about 2 decks that aren't legal in the format.
Right. So the one time that I played against like the Oath version, I think was like before it was normal to play Duress, or at least not multiple Duresses main. Right. And I just kind of like let my opponent do whatever he wanted, and it just didn't matter because I could disrupt his graveyard and he couldn't disrupt mine meaningfully, or I could stop him from disrupting mine.
Exactly. That's just like the biggest angle. But I want to kind of talk a little bit amorphous. Like I want to kind of move on because I do think that thanks to the fact that nobody can play any of Sam's decks anymore, I want to talk about like your view of like, I guess kind of like the nature of the format, what you think about when approaching it. I know that you play this mostly for fun. You're really not out there. You're not ready to fly out here and battle us, which we're heartbroken by, but is acceptable. So, granted, because creativity and the inspiration and all that stuff, I'm really inspired. So what's kind of, your approach? What are your observations, and what are like the things that, you want to try to break it once more?
My approach to Premodern is very similar to my approach to Modern while I was playing Lantern. My take on Lantern was that at the time it was the best Mox Opal deck, and Mox Opal was the best card in Modern. my take on Premodern is that Mox Diamond is legal. And so I just want to play the best Mox Diamond deck because I think Mox Diamond is head and shoulders above the other cards in the format. I think that Mox Diamond both gives you like more mana faster and fixes the color mana issue that like makes multicolor decks without Diamond more or less unplayable. Obviously, Mox Diamond was incredible in every way with land tax, but I still think Mox Diamond is like the best even without land tax. I think Gush in particular is a great friend of Mox Diamond. I think the fact that I view like the thing that's going on in Tax Rack is we're just a Mox Diamond deck is part of why I see Gush as an essential part of that deck. And then the fact that I see Gush as an essential part of that deck is why I see Foil as an essential part of that deck. So that's kind of just like where I'm coming from. Like it was literally just like step 1 is I want to play Mox Diamond. Step 2, land tax is the best thing with Mox Diamond. Step 3, if I'm playing land tax, I have to play Scroll Rack. Step 4, if I'm playing land tax and Scroll Rack, I have to play Enlightened Tutor. Step 5, if I'm playing Enlightened Tutor, I have white mana in my deck, so I have to play Swords to Plowshares. Step 6, I'm still a Mox Diamond deck, so I need Gush. Step 7, I have Gush, so I need Foil. And then step 8, I guess Dreadnought's like the best threat, and if I put Dreadnought in my deck, I can kill people and my curve stops at 2. 2 is a good curve topper.
That's a great curve topper.
So what about your other back of the napkin decks? Because you share these on your Discord, the Challenging Assumptions Discord with Sam Black. You can find probably a link in your Twitter bio or something like that.
Yeah, that's where you can find a link.
And you've shared a couple back of the napkin decks, including one of my favorites, which also can't close a match, the Domain Control deck, as well as like a spicy Psychotog deck. Every now and then you've got some scribbles that don't contain Mox Diamond. So do you have any interest in kind of pulling on those threads more?
So I kind of lied about my process because I touched on every card in my deck except the most important one, which is Gaia's Blessing. The reason I paid any attention to the format at all is actually that Michael J tweeted a blue-green Gaia's Blessing deck with a bunch of powder kegs and nonsense. And
he agrees it's nonsense.
Like, it's not that good.
This is a format where you can play Gaia's Blessing. I guess I should look into it.
I'm glad to have roped you in. The land tax lovers in the format are sad that I roped you in.
Yeah, so I guess from a strategic how do I win framing, the process that I walked through about how I choose which cards are in my deck was accurate. From a love of the game, what am I doing here perspective, level 0 is, so there are 3 Gaia's Blessings in my deck.
Joy.
Yeah, those 3 Gaia's Blessings, I went ahead and so I've been playing your Domain Control list. It just says something that I've got in the box, and I played it at one of our meetups, and the Haunting Echoes.
Seen Lanny so grumpy. He was grumpy all night. He was grumpy the whole week, actually.
I was like, I just couldn't. I had complete control. And I was like, I couldn't find my Haunting Echoes. I added 1 Baloth, as you might recall. I couldn't find my win condition. I'd be like, okay, Baloth, and they're like, I'll plow it. I'm like, okay, I'll see you in 20 turns, Baloth. It was really bad. But that deck is super cool. Allied Strategies for 5 is awesome. But yeah, I guess it's just sort of interesting because I think a lot of what we see you doing is that you don't I guess this is the question. Do you think that if something's established in the format, this is the good deck or whatever, the tier 1 deck, do you think that that is true and difficult to dispute. Like if you just take some, whatever contemporary format where it's just like Pioneer and you're like, just like whatever, mono green or red black, like this is the best deck. Like when you go ahead and choose not to play those decks, is your statement more about like, I think that I have a better deck than that? Or is it like a, rogue, like whatever? Because I think, what your approach to Premodern thus far has been like, people don't know what the best deck is. Sam's deck is the best deck. Whereas I think most people don't think about that way in formats. They tend to accept that tier 1 is tier 1 and they're just looking for angles.
Yeah, so I tend to think that like in deeply explored post-Pro Tour formats, tier 1 is usually correct. In formats that large numbers of pros haven't worked together to try to solve, no one has any idea what's happening.
Right. And so you'll bring that heat to CEDH and I guess Legacy too. No pros play Legacy, yeah. But
yeah.
But that said, you'll still show up to a standard tournament, right? The standard RC with a deck of your own design. So
this deck was gas.
What's kind of like, is there a motivation? Like, why not just play whatever tier 1?
Well, that wasn't a post Pro Tour format, right?
Okay,
this
so
deck is still gas.
you thought it was a.
Doesn't matter. I mean,
Okay.
white control was
Okay.
one of the main pillars of the format at the time, and Sam's just had a better white control deck.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. So you would say that the RC standard, which was RC in San Diego that just passed, had not sort of gotten enough pressure on it from pro preparation.
So, I mean, like that standard format, I would say everyone knew the good cards. But there were a lot of different configurations that people were playing them in. And my impression was that kind of like the best deck was Esper Legends. And that is a kind of deck that I am not well suited to play. I was having a conversation with a guest at dinner yesterday. This is not new ground for me, but we were discussing tactical versus strategic players, and I consider myself to be the very, very far extreme of strategic player, which is both a boast and admission of fault, I guess, simultaneously. I think that there are very few players in the game who, when they like understand a format and have played it a bit, have like a better strategic approach to any given game or matchup or deck or archetype or whatever than I do. But there are a very large number of players who have like better tactical skills than I do. And a way that we framed it that I think is pretty good is basically like the tactical approach is like what is like the starting from right now, what's the right play, what happens next if I do this, then like these possibilities exist, and then from there are these other branching possibilities. Let me figure out like which of these branches are good, and kind of like brute force your way through thinking about like the rest of the game starting in this moment. And I don't think that like my brain has the processing power to be great at brute forcing through how does the game play out starting from here, and how do we like prune bad ideas to find the right play. And instead I jump to what is this game about? What is the end point? Given that that's the end point, how do I get there? And
sort of
Sam,
a
can I
big
interrupt you for
picture,
a
small
second?
picture thing.
yeah, what's up?
Well, I would actually. I'm going to ask you a question. This is
Sure.
not a conclusion I'm drawing. Do you feel like regardless of how much preparation you've had, like we joke about how much preparation you put into Premodern, but obviously that's not universal across different formats that you care about. If you're this Earth strategic player versus, not one of the best tactical players on Earth, do you feel like you just played all the games and you know that like you know what it's look at how a pre-Google chess computer would have run it, right? Like, oh, I just have a library of all the available games. I'm just going to best fit to this based on my preparation and my deck selection. Where deck selection and probably limited deck selection, right? Given your background as a limited player is just like, okay, there's n iterations, but I've actually played all of them, so I'm just going to best fit this.
A little Doctor Strange.
It's an interesting theory with valid premise, like the idea that like, oh well, you've played more games of Magic than roughly everyone, so you can probably just like think of a game to map this to, and then you don't need to like think through it all because you can just be like, oh, this is like that time, blah blah blah. And I think that there is like that isn't inaccurate, but I also think that like my approach would be my approach, like if that weren't true, or if I were playing a different game, or I think that a lot of this is just about how my brain works. Like I think that I am good at like understanding systems and bad at like brute force processing in general.
So I would just like, we played a match recently at the weekend of the RC, right? You tricked me into playing in the PTQ on Sunday, and I went first, so I won game one. But so it took me like 2 days to realize why I'd lost the match, actually, right? So I won game one, and Sam's playing a white control deck. So I am the kind of player, I think like Sam is, where I'm not the best improvising at the table. So new information is actually bad for me, right? So the more I can pattern against things that I played in the past is good for me. So I'm just like, oh, processing. Sam's playing a white control deck. This is how I sideboard against white control decks. It never occurred to me that my trump card, which was Fable the Mirror Breaker against white, like I'm a red deck, I'm now switching into a Fable the Mirror Breaker deck, when I have like all these mid-range cards, was just trumped by the fact that Sam's deck is better on fundamentals, and now he's getting even better because he's a Fable the Mirror Breaker deck, and I'm just trying to break even at this point. Versus all the white control decks I'd beaten on day one were just like, oh, I win on these fundamentals sometimes, right? But I'm just like a mile better than them when I become a Fable the Mirror Breaker Koth mid-range deck. But he's just he starts off with better fundamentals, and I never gained, right? So then I'm just like, I don't understand why I'm losing. I end up losing to cards that I'd never seen before. Like, you think Archangel of Wrath me, and you couldn't even make black mana. And so, but that's kind of like the parallel that I'm drawing, where it's like the new information took me 2 days to process after I'd already lost the match. And it was because I didn't have anything in my library for this. And maybe I should have just been even more beat down or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of an interesting example because do we feel like improvising is more tactical or more strategic? And how does that what role does like being in an unfamiliar situation like play in that? Because like one of the big reasons why you weren't able to sort of develop neither a strategy nor a tactic was because you were just unfamiliar with what Sam was doing. So that's like kind of a tricky thing because I'm not sure how it intersects with this idea, just because both strategy and tactics seem to be reliant on relevant preparation.
I mean, if you're asking me, I'd say the majority of players who aren't very good, and I would put myself in this category, imagine themselves to be the kind of player that Sam described himself as, which is like, oh, I'm a good strategic player, but sometimes I make mistakes at the table, right? I would argue that most of those players actually also have bad strategy, and they think that they have a library of games to draw against, but their library of games is minuscule relative to the library of games of an actual good strategic player.
That's called boomer intuition.
So like, yeah, you have a bunch of words for it, right? But I think that like people are actually very bad at strategy, and they don't understand. They often don't even understand how their deck works, right? And they're doing this. But I would say I definitely have a weak spot on tactics, and that like things that I didn't prepare for exacerbate for me. Like Sam beating me is a good example, right? I beat him on beatdown in game one, right? Like I went first. I got a point of damage in because we were relying on Mirrex, I think, You probably don't care. Like,
Oh no, yeah, I kept a like Mirrex No Mountain Hand that had Bitter Reunion and like a bunch of red cards, and so I like got to see a decent number of cards, but never found Mountain.
Yeah, so if I had understood why I had won game one, I probably would have tried to make my deck really fast. Instead of like, I was used to just sitting there and accumulating resources and then blowing somebody out because I had like, because like people are like, oh, well, people know how to play against a black deck with Fable, right? But like, do they know how to play against a red deck that's just like, I'm going to remove all of your stuff. I have Fable, Koth, and Chandra all going simultaneously. I just would never have processed that Sam was playing the same game as me, but better. Right, like he just had a bunch of cards that were like.
Right, we're both Fable into Planeswalkers, but my Planeswalkers happen to be flying creatures that kill your Planeswalkers.
Yeah, he just like took a turn where he killed like my Chandra and my Koth at the same time, and I'm like, what the hell just happened?
The trouble I have with your side of the story is that it sounds to me like you were strategically outplayed by Sam.
No, I thought that I was strategically outplayed. It's I misidentified what it was going on. Right. My pattern system was, this is how I beat white control decks. I misidentified that Sam actually was already ahead of me on that vector, and that like I had to choose a different plan or my loss was going to be inevitable.
Okay, I want to tie this into deck selection because I think that what we're talking about with tactics is sort of talking about like the Reed Duke, Brad Nelson, like tactical mid-range player archetype versus the Sam Black, you know. I want to help define the strategic archetype because my question is, do you feel like your role, like your play style as a strategist sort of necessitates that you, effectively don't play a known, like, because you're also not a fan of open deck lists, right? So you effectively just don't play a known deck list.
Well, so, I mean, that said, there have been tournaments that I, like, you know, my best run ever was with Mono Blue Devotion during Theros Standard, where I top-8'd a Pro Tour and then 3 Grand Prix in a row with that deck. And it was, you know, a known quantity. It, like, crushed that Pro Tour. And then it was, like, one of the pillars of that format rather than, like, the deck to beat. It was, like, there was that and Mono Black and Esper, and then there were like some tier 2 decks like Red Green Monstrous or whatever. And after every tournament, I was like, maybe I need to stop playing blue because maybe people are finally going to like play more of these like random cards that Mono Blue can't beat. And then that kept not happening and I kept winning. So there are a few decks. So I would say that, you know, a deck like Lantern Control that I played a decent amount and had good results with is a deck that really rewards strategists. You need to understand everything that the matchup is about to know which of their cards matter and which of their cards don't, and like just this is what the game is going to be about, and whatever. There are, you know, there's not like a lot of like which creature should I kill that's informed by like how much damage is this going to deal to me over the next n turns or whatever. There's just like what has to happen to get from here to them being locked.
So, Sam, if I can interrupt you for a second, I think like would you say using both Mono Blue Devotion and Lantern Control as examples, I think like the thing that I'm hearing implied is that imbalances in preparation lead to wrong conclusions on the part of your opponents. So like in the case of Lantern Control, if people aren't aiming directly for Lantern Control, the number of ways they can interact profitably with you is relatively narrow, and that you just aim for those things because you know from your superior position of preparation relative to the table, right? Like I just have to deal with the following X cards in the matchup, and otherwise they can't beat me, right? Which is actually not dissimilar from how you approach Premodern. And I was actually chuckling when you were talking about maybe I should stop playing Mono Blue because people have figured it out. I remember that format really well, and I think that by the end of the format, people still didn't know who the beatdown was between Mono Blue and Mono Black. And I would say that right now, I don't think people knew who the beatdown was. And I also said, I think Reed Duke will top 8 this Pro Tour because they gave him a creature that's basically a Sensei's Divining top. So he's never going to lose, and he didn't lose it for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting tie-in because like I think it's what you're doing, of course, is you're setting yourself up for success in the certain play style you have. But one thing that like I guess should be clear, like the thing that's exciting, right, is like I think everyone dreams of basically coming up with the deck innovation, taking it to a tournament, and then of course winning the tournament. Surprising your opponents. And there's like kind of a confluence of things that make that possible. So like I'm trying to figure out the question in there, but it's sort of like, well, you're a strategist, but you also like, you also have access to something. You described it as the muse in our coaching session, which you have access to like a muse that has a much better batting average than the muses of other players. So like, do you credit that to your ability to strategize with the deck once you've built it? Or, is there an element to your approach to constructing a deck that kind of like, sets you up for success? Like, what do you do that other people don't? I mean, but like aside from, I guess it's such a complicated thing because in a sense, you're one of the very, very few people like just in the world who brews decks with the goal of like competitive success. Like when Mike told me that he thought I was, the greatest deck designer or amongst the greatest, I was just like, oh,
I thought you were the best.
Yeah,
and then
it's like
Sam's red white deck followed by.
And I'm like, well, it's clearly
it's
like,
obvious that Sam was the best after the red white.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's clearly someone like Sam Black or Mohan Everett, aspiring Spike. But short of that list, I actually struggle to find people who are sort of dedicated to creating new strategies to then play.
So I mean, is the answer just I try to do it, and most people just don't think it's possible? I mean, like, so many people, like, the general consensus is like it's a waste of time to try to build a deck for a tournament because you're not going to do better than the hive mind has already done, and I just don't believe that.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a
good answer, I guess,
in the official Miser's Guide about that, and the answer is it matters a lot if you're a content creator. And for real, right?
No, of course, yeah.
So let's say your average finish, regardless of who you are, is not winning the tournament, right? Like, even if you're the best player, you don't win the tournament on average, right? So you say even if you're the best player, your average is not making top 8, right? However, if you're a content creator, there's a huge difference between making top 8 with your brew and making top 8 with the deck that anybody else can play. And so, like, if any of us have the opportunity to do above average some of the time when people are paying attention, the overlap between doing well and doing well with your brew is it's like insanely magnified relative to anybody doing well with any random deck. Because the overlap I definitely is what's important.
The thing that you're talking about is extremely true. Like the incentives for me and other content creators, but especially other content creators who like different content creators brand themselves and market themselves for different things. And I have kind of always pursued, hey, I'm someone to listen to about like deck designing and like new ideas. Whereas, there are other people who are like, I'm an expert at playing the best deck. So for me, like, the best result I can have in a tournament is winning with the known deck or winning with the deck that I've been writing about to show, hey, my sideboard guide is truth, everyone should buy it. But the game that I've been playing as a content creator has always been like, hey, I want to be able to like just make up some new decks this week so that I have something to write about, because a deck no one's played before is always something new that I can explain. And so I want to build up a brand where people believe that like this random list of cards that no one's played in a tournament before is like worth reading if I write it. And so I mean, that's been where I've existed since I started writing. And so, for the last 15 years or so, my incentives have been that. So, like, every Pro Tour I've ever played, like, part of my, deck selection value proposition is like, okay, these decks are really close. One of them is like the team deck that's like a slight evolution of what everyone's been playing on Moto, and the other deck is like a deck that I built that is about as good, maybe slightly worse, but it has an edge because no one's played against it. And obviously I've played against like whatever decks they're going to be playing. So, maybe I'm at a slight disadvantage on deck quality, but I expect to make it up on average on matchup familiarity and whatever. It doesn't actually matter which of these decisions is like better from winning the tournament perspective, because it's so much more valuable for me to go, 11-5 with my deck than 11-5 with the established deck.
So I actually just want to say Sam taught me something. It was actually after I was on Team Ultra Pro, but like he taught me something that I didn't know for like 20 years, and it was insane. So Sam, I think it was Pro Tour Milwaukee. You made the Bant deck, and like Tom and Ben played it to like high finishes, but not top 8. And his toolkit was just, I realized how good Sam's toolkit was relative to everybody else's. He's just like, well, look at where you can get value. We're playing cards that are not bad. Like, and so like the rating of them is not bad, right? But not bad is not that much worse than the aces, right? So if you think of the best card you could play in the abstract is like Siege Rhino, for sake of rights. This is the best card you can play. Well, Wingmate Rock isn't that much worse than Siege Rhino. It's like a little bit worse, okay? But we just played like Wingmate Rock and Dispel and some ridiculous sort of like white enchantments that are like, also their rating is not bad. They're like not as good as Abzan Charm, but like they're not that much worse. You're talking about a card that's like rated, 97 points and 93 points or something. And so we're giving up like, if you added up all the cards in our deck and you added up all the cards in the Abzan deck that won the Pro Tour, right? Like we didn't give up that many points, but we got a lot of points because who the hell is going to play around Dispel in this like this big creature deck? There's not open deck lists, right? Like, so you just get like, you get massive value from information imbalance, right? And you give up very little from configuration.
Yeah. But I think this is my like Sam Black built this in a cave moment where like, I think that by talking, like, I don't want to bring the content creation thing in there because it's at least from itself, right? Like you enjoy this, like you made a choice. Like the brand followed after, some initial success. And like, look, you brew decks in limited. Like that's like the thing that, again, like you said, like maybe people don't even think to do that, to like explore more than the defined archetypes in like a limited environment. But maybe I guess the point is we'll never know your secret. Besides you've practiced and you've done it enough and you've tried. And I do think that that's like an important first step of trying. So I guess I'll lay it out. From what I'm hearing, you need to be you kind of need to be a strategist. So your preparation, your understanding of the format like needs to be up to a certain level. Number 2, you still have to be playing at least not bad cards. And in some cases like Premodern, you're just going to play the best cards, which people, for price considerations or other considerations don't play. So it still kind of felt like you were going rogue. And then there's just the last one is going to be to practice doing that until you break through and rely on where the muse guides you. You have to find your own muse, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, like if you understand what things a deck needs to be able to do, and you understand how good a card is, and you play a deck that does everything a deck needs to do with cards that don't suck, your deck is probably playable.
Right. Yeah, I mean that is basically
your average finish isn't that much worse than your average finish with the stock deck. Is the last part of the sentence.
No, actually, yeah, I love that. I love that particular angle about it because I think that a lot of the narrative has been, it's a narrative inspired by tactics, which is the idea that if you lose a percentage point, in your deck selection, like that's a percentage point that you had for free, right? Like just play whatever, but play red, black, play Murktide. Like why would you choose a deck that you lose percentage on. I think everybody on this call doesn't really believe, that the only approach is to start with the deck that's 52% and then try to tactically play your way to get all 52% and then spike.
I don't know. I think most people literally don't understand how their deck works. I think most people literally don't understand how the matchup in front of them works, and then they win by random events.
Well, yeah, but
I think that's how most Magic goes.
Right, but not for those who are trying to find success on like the under higher pressure environments.
Even at the high levels. So like I was just thinking about this like in context of what Sam was saying about being a strategist versus a tactician. I actually went and looked up the top 8 that I was instrumental in, and I didn't know that Andre Coimbra had made top 8 of Worlds in 2009 until that Sunday, because I was just like not paying attention to the Worlds coverage. I got a phone call.
This is lightsaber standard, yeah?
Yes, it's lightsaber, and it's just like, and it was like BDM and Andre were just like, I need a sideboard guard. These are my matchups coming in, right? So Andre was playing against Bram Snapfangers, Pro Tour Hall of Famer in the top 4, and I ran home and I watched the match, right? And he sideboarded the opposite of how I said to sideboard. And I talked about it with him afterwards, and he's just like, Bram sideboarded into a mid-range deck, right? The sideboard strategy that you gave me predicated that I was going to be playing against a beatdown deck. So when he lost a game, and he's just like, oh shoot, he's just a mid-range deck now, right? So this is actually very parallel to the match that I had with Sam. He's just like, I just dig into I'm just the same deck as him with Baneslayer Angel and removal, except for I have Noble Hierarch, which is better than not having Noble Hierarch, right? He had Mox Opal, and Graham didn't, so he just destroyed him on the fundamentals, right? So, but Andre actually lost a game where he was trying to be like, I'm just going to be like quick removal, fast response is quick removal, because he ended up getting Archangel of Wrath by Bram having bigger cards, right? So like that is a case where somebody has tools in front of him, cards that don't suck, maybe in the parlance that we've been talking about, but he's hyper improvised the situation that he was in. He's just like, I'm just gaining information now, gaining data from the matchup that I'm in, but my opponent is not going to cooperate with my sideboard strategy. Ergo, I need to pick a different sideboard strategy or I'm going to lose the match. And then, history says he didn't lose the match or any other matches.
Yeah, tying this into Premodern, I kind of have talked about the Dreadnought Mirror a lot, and through playing it, my opinion is that the sort of game theory optimal play is that both players need to essentially play a long grindy game where basically whoever accumulates the most lands and gushes wins, but you can sort of break that paradigm by keeping all your dazes and like just trying to go fast into the other player, and then it's just like a little bit more swingy, but it's less reliable.
You use the term game theory optimal all the time, and I don't think it's appropriate in this case, and B, like when I play that matchup, I jam as soon as I can most of the time under the theory that people are going to try to grind me. So if they're going to play to try to grind, like I leave in all my dazes, for example. And you just talked about leaving in all your dazes. And
so my strategy in that matchup is actually to side out all my dreadnoughts and Gaia's Blessing.
Yeah.
Well, not everyone had your tool set.
Sam's strategy.
They didn't have Wingmake rocks, right? So you fly over 3 4s for 5. They didn't have that.
Let me explain. So my game theory optimal is set so that one player can get 50%, the other player can get 50%, and your strategy is maybe more of like a 45%, but it's like a lock, and if your opponent's not prepared for it or doesn't keep a hand that like whatever, you can find the seam. I think both is fine.
If I assume my opponent is taking out days and I leave in days, then I have to play a game where the mana is such that my dazes are efficacious, and the fact that they don't have days punishes them.
Yeah, but you also have to mulligan. I mean, that's the idea.
I mean, like I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you keep a keepable 7.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of different games you can play.
But that's a range. Right. Okay. Let's. That's all in all. I mean,
I want to talk about something.
Go for it. Yeah.
Just on the subject of building decks and like why to do it. So like Mike correctly pointed out the incentive thing and how that's like been a factor throughout my career. But I was like a brewer before I was a content creator. As we discussed, my like breakout tournament in the Winnacar tournament was with a deck that was nothing like anything anyone else was playing. It didn't even follow the don't play bad cards principle. And like the first actual tournament that I won was regionals the year before that. With
One Birds of Paradise, right?
Yep, my favorite deck I've ever played. Not the best relative to its format, but a really sweet deck. It was 4 Sensei's Divining Top, 4 Court of Calling, 4 Wood Elves, 4 Sakura Tribe Elder, 4 Noble 4 Loxodon Hierarchs, and then just like one of a whole bunch of different stuff that people played decks built around, but that were bad to draw multiples of. Like there was a green-white Greater Good deck that played, there was a green-white Glare of Vitugazi deck that played like 4 glares. There was like a black-white like small creature beatdown deck that played 4 Umezawa's Jites. And there was like a Kamigawa dragon like deck that played 4 Greater Goods. And I was like, well, I can play the necessary creatures for all of those strategies and have access to them with like Top and Court of Calling. And then instead of having a bunch of redundant copies of 4 mana make my creatures do something cards in Greater Good, Glare, and Jite, I can just play one of each of them. And I can play whatever game I want based on like which of those things I draw or whatever I want to choose to draw because of Top in this matchup. And like if I draw 2 of them, instead of having like a blank card, I have 2 super powerful engines and can choose the order in which I want to deploy them. And that deck had this weird structure where it basically couldn't, like, the more colors in common my opponent had with me, the better the matchup was. If they were playing blue-red, I couldn't win. If they were playing any subset of Abzan, I couldn't lose.
So, Lanny, this is actually something that we've never talked about, but you've bumped up against, and this is my boomer intuition. So there's this concept of getting out mid-ranged, right? So people are like, oh, mid-range decks can beat or lose on it. You can get out mid-ranged. And that, like, Sam is talking now about a situation where he has mid-range inevitability because his opponent goes too far in a direction, right? Like, and the direction is only 2% in a direction, but Sam only went 1% in that direction, so he has like 15% in a different direction if he wants. So he just has opportunities for trump at a minimum, if not card advantage, where his opponent is just like locked into a strategy.
Right, and it was a deck that played really well, into, my like strength as a strategist, where it's just like, which of the, like, do I want to be a Glare deck, a Greater Good, a Jite deck, like a Debtor's Knell deck, like which of the many like games my deck can play is this matchup about? Because it just had a ton of card selection.
That's tough to do in contemporary Magic because they put so much power into low casting cost permanents now.
Yes.
But I super appreciate the era Sam is talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all do, and I think that's a big reason.
That's why anyone plays Premodern.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you're talking about an era that was 3 years after.
No, I know this isn't
Scourge.
the Premodern era.
Oh yeah,
but I think that like the purpose of Premodern is to get away from like the snowbally cards of like Modern Standard.
Right.
Like this is still the pre-Planeswalker era.
Yeah.
So
very important to note. Like people play Classic Legacy as well, which I don't know if it's full pre-Planeswalker, but it is pre like Commander cards and nostalgia. Like there's a ton of nostalgia, old school formats basically that are based on some sort of design principle that's like from an earlier era. I wanted to ask Sam about the statement that he made. You tweeted this, and I don't know if I understood it, and so I'd love for you to kind of explain more. Where you're talking about decks that are the best. What was it? Best in their form, like in their context or something? Because you mentioned that here, and then you mentioned that with Taxnot. So what exactly does that mean? Like, what's an example?
So a deck being the best relative to its format is basically just like you go into a tournament, where do you have like the best equity, like the best matchup advantage against the field? So like a tournament where I might have had the best deck relative to its format would be Pro Tour Philadelphia 2011, the first modern Pro Tour where I was playing Mono Blue Blazing Shoal Infect.
Oh my god, I was literally one of my all-time favorite decks. So good.
And so the thing that format was about was, it was like a new format that everyone knew was broken in various ways. And so everyone is basically just like, okay, here are all the like busted combo decks. And then the other options are, here's a busted ramp deck, or here's a disruptive creature deck. And I happened to find out about and then tune what I believed would be the combo deck that was best against other combo decks, because it was simultaneously fast and disruptive more than the other combo decks were. Because it just like won with cheaper cards and had room for counter spells because its combo was like relatively tight. So it was basically just like combo beater combo.
Right. So then you made the statement that you won't know if Tax Not is going to be the best deck that you've played relative to its format.
Right. Because like, both of these are decks that effectively got banned immediately after I played them. So there was no ability to like build a lot of like matchup data against how they stack up against the other decks in their field.
Lanny, do you know this deck? This deck that Sam's talking about?
Mono Blue Infect? I mean, I've heard I've heard Legend.
Right, so it has a crossover at Progenitus, which is a weird crossover for two different decks. Right? Like when Sam's just like, oh,
they both have giant monsters.
My deck, this one deck has like a Gush foil engine, and then this other deck also could play Gush and foil if you're Sam Black. There's a crossover here, but these are two distinct engines, right? Like his crossover is at Progenitus.
Yes. 10
Sorry, my crossover with what?
Between the Tax Not deck and the Infect deck.
No.
Both have 12 power creation.
The Infect deck is two different decks. Like one deck is discard Progenitus to Blazing Shoal the opponent. The other one is to just get Progenitus in play.
No, the deck had no way to get Progenitus into
play. He's being ironic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's being silly. Both decks contain monsters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I actually got a little. I want to go back to the point that I was making before. Yep. So about how I've always been a deck builder, and it's not just the content creation angle that is the incentive for that. Another part of it is, what is your goal? And my situation in CEDH right now is, you talked about like there is an established CEDH meta, and I build decks. I could just play like Timnacrom or one of the other decks that is like accepted as like the gold standard in the format, and I don't. And people talk about, it's a 4-player format, so if you're winning like 30% of your games, you're doing all right. And so like if you had a deck that was literally just like, on turn 1, I win with protection 30% of the time, and the rest of the time I mulligan to Oblivion and lose. And those are the only outcomes. Is that a deck you'd want to play? And for a lot of players, they'd be like, yeah, I mean, that's better than like normal equity. That sounds like a good deck. I guess that's a good choice for a tournament. And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to do better than that. Not a lot of people know this, but people who have followed my career closely might. There was another game that Wizards released called Dreamblade. That was a miniatures game that they launched with like a Grand Prix style tournament series. This was before that strategy had proven to be a poor marketing decision many times, in an era when where a bunch of people were doing that. And I played that game, and I was roughly the best in the world. I won the first tournament of that game and the second tournament of that game, and then was like, a known quantity, like established player, wrote strategy articles about the game, and had the experience of like, when I go to a tournament, everyone expects that I'm going to win. This was right after my first Pro Tour, but before I had like real Magic success. And I credit the experience of having that role in Dreamblade with like giving me the mental game in Magic needed to succeed. Where like I just was used to, playing elimination matches, like having the spotlight, going in with like, the pressure that exists around expectation that you'll do well. And like it was, just transformative to be in that place from a like mental game perspective. An experience that I had in that game once was, so it's a complex board game type game with dice. And the way that I practiced that game was with my roommate, Justin Cohen, and we would like, talk through everything and make like, optimal plays. And so I made this move where my opponent could choose to attack me. And if they did, they would basically have a 40% chance of crushing me and a 60% chance of like roughly losing the game. And so I was like, okay, cool. So my opponent can't take that move. So this is the right move for me this turn. And my opponent saw the opportunity to have a 40% chance to win the game, knew that they were playing against me, and they were like, sign me up. I will take my 40%er. And they hit their 40%er, and I ended up losing. And I was like, oh, that was correct for them and incorrect for me. I should not have given them a 40% chance to win this game. This was an 80% matchup.
But that's also great assessment by the opponent, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Like, I love it.
Yep.
Right. Like it was correct by them and wrong by me.
King 9 shove.
Yeah. And so my approach to Commander is just like, if I have a deck that's winning less than 50% of my 4-player games, I'm not interested. Like I believe that it is possible to do better than that, and I believe that I can find better than that. And I don't believe that playing the existing decks, like I believe that more broken than what people know about exists, and I just need to find it.
Yeah.
And I think most people just don't have that arrogance.
Is it arrogance?
The humility,
you just have a different objective?
the humility scales have all of a sudden shot.
No, I mean, I agree with Sam.
No, we all agree. I mean, look, I think like I said, everyone on this call wants to, know something, find something out that other people don't.
So, well, there's a thing what Sam was talking about. It's just like, why even bother to try to out-design the hive mind, right? I think that the times that you can out-design the hive mind, especially since Magic Arena for Standard, right, it's become very rare, right? So that's one of the reasons why I was so impressed by Sam's red-white deck coming out of the RC, because it was just so meaningfully better.
He built this in a cave, like.
No, but I'm not kidding, right? So like, I used to fight with Patrick Chapin about this all the time. I was just like, there's just no point in trying to like discuss this thing. And then every so often we'd come up with like 5-color mono blue dragons or something, which is like something that no one had ever seen before. I mean,
a notable thing about the red-white deck is that like I'm not reinventing the wheel, right? Like that was a twist on an established archetype where I found like a couple of good cards that fundamentally change how the deck works and makes it better. But it's not really like a ground up kind of deck.
No, but my rule is always, the question that I always ask is, should a deck exist, right? So like a lot of the time people play these decks and I'm just like, well, I don't know why you're playing this in Premodern or whatever format. This is literally just this other deck, but worse. Yeah, right. And it's worse across the board almost every single time. They're just like, this is just Sly with exploitable mana, right? Or this is just this, and except for you deal more damage to yourself on average. And people are just like, I want to play this. And like, So they have a shitty reason for wanting to play this deck. Your deck gained more life than the average white deck, despite having a mana base that could, be different colors or whatever. Then also did weird things like buying Bitter Reunion out of the graveyard with the Rebuy Angel was so profoundly different and interesting, and then it has all these implications that are going that just complexify how this otherwise Mono White is the simplest deck in Standard in some ways, right? It only does one thing, which is to build advantages on the battlefield, and hopefully those advantages withstand Invoke Despair, and you have enough life points that you don't lose to direct damage. That's basically it. And if both of those conditions are true, you beat your opponent with a 3/4. That's about what it does, right? But you gained all these levels of value that were there. So my rule is always just one of two things. Did you make your deck a turn faster, right? So if you make your deck a turn faster, you win. If you make your deck a turn faster, now you actually have the archetype deck, right? Not even a reason to exist. If you just take the same deck, you're a turn faster, you're the archetype deck, and it might take people a while to figure it out, right? So a good example is, I always joke, but Sandy Dog won a Grand Prix with Wild and the Cattle a month after I had already... I was like, this is how Burn deck should be built. And it took 6 months before everybody was playing my Burn deck, right? I played it at a regional championship, and I can't remember who, some multiple Grand Prix top 8 competitor, made fun of me for having the card Inspiring Vantage in my deck. If you can imagine, he said, nice Standard card. Okay, now look at how Burn decks are built in Modern, right? So it's just you make your deck a turn faster, or you gain a capability without meaningfully giving up something else. So one of the things I gave up the capability of losing to other Burn decks by having stupid Stomping Ground in my deck, right? I lost nothing. Just don't play a Tarkus command, right? The same way, your red-white deck, you gained a ton of capabilities and arguably gained speed, right? So that's the way I think it's hey, can you make this one of two things? Did you gain capability, or did you gain speed? Because if you're the same deck but faster, you actually just win. You win.
Yeah. It's not straight up a brew, but it's definitely an innovation. That's
right. And so you're framing it in terms of the effect of building the deck this way was this big picture thing. But I think where it came from was more the thing that the white mirror is about is the fact that white's not good at answering planeswalkers. And so you have these competing planeswalker decks where post-board, sometimes pre-board, they have farewell. And so people can build up these massive advantages that just don't matter, because if it's not a planeswalker, it just gets killed. And so the whole game is about competing for planeswalker advantage, where no one has an actual good answer to planeswalkers, because they have ossification, but that gets swept up by farewell,
destroyed by any number of enchantment removal cards, right?
But if you just play a bunch of flying creatures with haste, you kill your opponent's planeswalkers very easily. And so then I was oh, everyone thinks that this matchup is about planeswalkers, but I can just beat my opponent's planeswalkers by making it about flyers. And also, I don't need to bother with planeswalkers because they're not that good. But the cards just aren't good in the deck.
What about the first time you gave a reflection haste? Or the thing is that's the thing. I was just oh man. Once the reflection gets haste, it's just because I think people really just never understood Fable of the Mirror Breaker. They're just they have all these words they say about Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and they're
no intuition.
They're just they're true in certain cases, right? And they're just oh, this is why it's bad. This is why it's good. This is why you're just saying words, but it's good in this case or this case. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is mostly good most of the time because the opponent has to spend 2 cards on it, and if they don't, they just lost some number of percentage points of winning the game. Probably somewhere between 5 and 15 points of winning the game if they don't spend 2 cards on it. What you did was you took away a turn by which they could spend one of the cards on half of the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And that means maybe you get 2 activations out of the reflection. That might be worth 30 percentage points in the game, right? Like,
yeah,
that's a massive upgrade.
It also like means that they can't answer the like backside with sorcery speed removal without me getting to use it.
Yeah, I mean, even when you give the goblin token, like an advantage sometimes, right? Like,
yeah, no, giving
like
the goblin token haste is also great.
Because in the way that you just designed your deck, that might mean that you have access to black mana for your Archangel of Wrath in a situation where you wouldn't typically have black mana, which means that you might come in for 7 instead of coming in for 3. You know, like there's so many things change based on this very small thing. But and like, so what I'm talking about is like not necessarily the generation of a new deck, but like why was your white control deck so much different and better from my perspective than a mono white one? It's like A, it was faster, B, it gained more life, right? So, and then C, it had like literally a library of different capabilities that other white controls just simply didn't have.
Yeah, so I built that deck and then I asked a friend if I should play it. And the answer was, well, like mono white does better than red white, and it's not like people haven't thought of putting Fable in the white deck. So like I assume that like you're just supposed to be mono white and not red, because like this isn't like, you know, this isn't new and it wasn't doing well. And I'm just like, no, I think this bitter reunion part is like pretty important, and people haven't done it.
That's the weird thing. Not a soul was playing Bitter Reunion at that point. And the other thing was Bitter Reunion being a permanent versus just being like a, you know, a tormenting voice or something was so vital to what made that deck interesting.
Oh man, I really hope our listeners have played All Will Be One Standard.
Dude, man.
Are we good on deck design? Because I did actually have one more topic.
Yeah, we've briefly touched on Premodern a few times in this podcast.
So, Sam, I know that you kind of have this game design thing going, and I want to ask you, between your experience of Premodern and your experience, at the very least, consulting on. Is it just one set? Is it just Modern Horizons, or are you at liberty to discuss?
Modern Horizons 2 is the set that I spent some time in the building working on.
Okay, so my question is really, you know, what is your sort of take on how Magic is designed now, and like, you know, what's kind of your opinion? Like, should contemporary Magic steer more towards like design that gives you pre-modern era gameplay? Like, are there like, what's kind of the lessons to be learned from pre-modern, or is it really just like, you know, pre-modern?
I don't think you can get there from here.
Fair, but okay, so let's. I mean, I don't know. Let's make this interesting, right?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? You mean that we can't go back at this point? It's too late?
Yeah.
Well,
toothpaste in the tube.
I mean, like, how do you get back, right? Like, if you assume that, like, pre-modern gets to play the way that it does because there's just, like, a lower power level that makes cards less snowball-y, Magic is too big for you to do Mercadian Masks. So for people who aren't ancient, Urza's Saga Block came immediately before Mercadian Masks. Saga Block was an incredibly powerful, relative to the game at its time, set with like a lot of, you know, cards that are busted and banned in various formats to this day. And
the ones that aren't banned are $1,000.
Yeah, and Masks was a bit of a step back in power level, a recalibration, and basically every card in the format in the block sucked.
That was my all-time best format.
And the problem, so when you do that, it's potentially good for the long-term health of the game, but the set in the moment doesn't end up like being well loved or selling very well. And I think that Wizards like moment to moment profit incentives are a little overwhelming for them to want to take a hit like that. And also, it is very clear that their design incentives are to never make a set that doesn't print a decent number of cards with a commander audience in mind. Like the commander audience is the bulk of the Magic audience, and you want to be able to sell cards to them.
Yeah. So I mean, let's go ahead and take economic incentives out of it. Like let's talk about designing the best game that we can, because that's sort of where I'm most interested. Because I think why
Wizards is a division of a public company. There is like
Mike,
it doesn't exist.
Mike, thought experiment.
There is no art and commerce.
Thought experiment. Okay. Because this is important because, like, let's go ahead and take economic incentive out. The first, what does the F in FIRE stand for, everybody?
Fun.
Right. So
It's not fun.
They're trying to design the most fun game possible. So my question really boils down to, let's say we printed, the next standard environment was like, I don't know, Wild Mongrel and like whatever. Like, the next standard environment had this sort of like pre-modern incremental like feel. Like everyone in this call thinks that this is fun. Sam, from your sort of design perspective,
nobody
do you
played
actually
Noose Constrictor, and that card was literally better than
I
Wild
know,
Mongrel.
but it's oh my God.
Well, right, but it existed among other cards that existed in a modern era.
Yeah, duh, Mike. Come on.
No, I mean
Anyways.
in the standard. Like I guess people played in the sideboard.
Oh my God, you know what question I'm asking. The question is, of course, like, when you look at contemporary Magic and if you were designing for an audience, like, even if it's like a smaller audience now or a bigger audience now, like, do you think that, like, I mean, I don't know, do you think that like, because you play every format, do you think that contemporary Magic is fun? Is it more fun compared to pre-modern? Do you think that, like,
I play and like every format.
Yeah.
I think Magic
You
is
like
fun.
Modern? You like Pioneer?
Yeah, duh. You know this about Sam, yeah?
Yeah.
Sam plays everything.
No, I mean I also play everything, and I mean I'm just thinking about like whether I should continue to play everything, but I don't have fun playing.
Yeah.
I mean I don't play everything. I don't play 100-card decks.
Yeah, but I mean, let's just go ahead. I mean,
they're fun.
I mean,
it ruined my game.
is it?
Have you played 250 card decks?
No.
Sam-
I would have a long alienating speech about this, so
All right,
I don't need
so-
to alienate, including our guests this week.
I just want to ask your personal opinion, because I think a lot of pre-modern era players feel alienated by the game in its contemporary state, and you clearly don't. You have an appreciation for both. So I don't know. Do you kind of get what I'm sort of like laying down, which is just like, what's your feel? Like, do you think that, like, we need to, like, dial back on the direction that contemporary formats are going? Do you think it's just like these two completely different things, and we're never going to get pre-modern play pattern out of contemporary Magic, or like, do you think that wouldn't even be a good thing because it wouldn't even be as fun as what we have now? Like, what's kind of like you're clearly drawn to pre-modern at least a little bit. So
Well, Gaia's Blessing is really powerful.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't know. So can you design a contemporary set that has Gaia's Blessing?
The thing, like, when I think about the experience of someone playing against me, I think that my non-pre-modern opponents would have more fun in the long run than my pre-modern opponents.
Interesting. Why? Because you feel like
Because he plays Gaia's Blessing decks.
Right. Like, I mean, when I have played pre-modern in the land tax era, I would say that my opponents rarely express a lot of joy about the game outside of any appreciation they might have for, like, the efficacy of my deck. There's not, like, a lot that, like, where they're feeling like, oh, this was some, like, really, like, engaging gameplay. I was really, like, looking forward to my, like, draw step to see if, like, the game would be different than it was in the previous turn. Like, you spend a lot of time in a situation where the outcome of the game is a foregone conclusion. like basically from when I signed up for the tournament.
The humility is all gone. Like,
well, if you had Sam's win rate, maybe you would have a.
That's what I keep telling
Sam's
people.
POV.
That's what I keep telling people. If I can be completely candid, I think your villain arc is definitely building up because you're
not.
out there. I broke Premodern, and there's some people who are just like, oh man, just give him to me. Like everyone wants to get a piece of you.
I actually would rather just talk about Sam being like, the reason land tax should be banned is because the game has reached an inflection point, and now it is a meme. And if you don't ban it, it's just gonna meme in these directions, and it's gonna become inevitable, right?
Yeah,
like
I've since it came out while we've been recording podcasts, I've only skimmed the reasoning from Martin Berlin, but it does seem like he's taken that idea into consideration, which is just that like if you're just gonna take every archetype and make it better by adding land tax, then it's got to go.
Right, like while land tax was its own archetype. And it was, maybe it was the best archetype, maybe it wasn't, but it was just like, here is one way that you can play this format. Here's a deck, and like that's fine. It like if we ban it, we remove an archetype. If it exists, it is an archetype. Whatever. The moment I prove, no, this isn't one archetype. This is a way to improve whatever deck you feel like improving. It's no longer acceptable. Like you just can't have this is the best way to do everything in the format.
Yeah, because the card is too good, right? Yeah. Like that was always my argument, right? Landy's counter argument was Parfait doesn't win at a preternatural rate. I was just like, that's irrelevant to the argument. The argument is the card is too good. If you line the card up to every other card in the format, it's impossible to play properly.
Well, Sam's card is actually Mox Diamond.
Did I get derailed before I finished telling the story about the conversation that I had with the
strategist tactician dinner guest?
No. The conversation I had with the successful Eternal player about the machinations of the tax rack engine.
I don't know if you go ahead and retell the point. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a conversation, right, so he was telling me about how he had a friend who had some decks and they would play, and he followed the format and saw that I'd been doing well with it, and I mentioned that, right, so I think we branched off at talking about trying to, like, separate player from deck to, like, figure out, so where I was going with that a very long time ago is, I mentioned, like, other people don't play my deck at a high rate. Like it hasn't seen like widespread adaptation. And like maybe that's just because not that many people own Mox Diamonds. Maybe it's because not that many people enjoy playing land tax. Or maybe it's because the deck is difficult for people to play and like it's difficult in a bunch of different ways. There's like the strategy about like which cards you need to interact with. And like when to what to tutor for, what to Gaia's Blessing back, what to counter, like how to like establish your like tax rack engine, like what to enlighten tutor for when you don't have either piece. A lot of moving parts. And I'm like, yeah, there are a lot of moving parts, but like, does it even matter? Like, you're drawing 7 cards a turn. Like, how you can mess it up so much and you still draw 7 cards a turn. And then I was like, well, I guess maybe like if someone didn't understand like the fundamental operations of the deck, independently from not understanding like this, complex strategy, like if they didn't know about like using scroll rack between their land tax triggers. And he was like, wait, what?
Okay, let's take a second. Surely, Jesus Christ, I hope Francisco knew this too. So Fran is one of the people who was just like, oh, I couldn't play Sam's deck. I, as a land tax player, am aware that you should have lands in your library to find for your second land. But
well, so one of my arguments against land tax was how badly I played the deck.
Right.
So I played plains when I should have been playing islands.
Oh, yeah.
I often forgot that I had Sylvan Library and Scroll Rack in play.
Sorry,
I would go entire turn cycles using neither Sylvan Library nor scroll rack.
Or triggering an ivory tower.
7, or I did not gain life without
but
I was drawing 7 cards a turn. Okay. How could I lose?
We're such bad podcasters. Please complete the point.
So, like, he never like found the like use rack between your tax triggers because he never had like just a bunch of these things in play because he would just shuffle away his extra land taxes because he didn't have enough lands in his deck.
Okay.
He would just like put them back with his scroll rack. And it's like, no. You cast it and you cast your scroll racks, and that's how you unlock draw 10 cards a turn every turn.
So,
but like when people are like, you know, maybe they can just like beat you by playing creatures because you only have 4 Swords to Plowshares in your deck. It's like, no.
You have infinite.
I draw 10 cards a turn. I blessing back all. I that means with Gaia's Blessing, I draw multiple Swords to Plowshares every turn. You cannot beat me by just casting more creatures. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think. I think this is like kind of. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. Like, my analysis is that. I have a little bit more of a tempered analysis because I'm kind of more plugged into what people are trying and what's going on. I do know people have tried the deck. I do know that, like, for instance, like Rich Shea has tried the deck, and Rich understands. Sort of how to like locate the lines and like formulate, he's a good strategist, he's a good tactician. So I will say that like basically the experience that most people had, or I'll just talk about our experience. So Francisco played the deck, we booted it up on Magic Online, and I beat him with like the Rock and I beat him with Goblins and like, whatever. And obviously those are decks that you probably don't find yourself losing to. And then same kind of thing. I played your deck, and then I kind of lost to the Rock, I lost to the Rock, and I lost to Blue-Green Madness, Survival Madness, and I was like, oh, again, I don't know. So I think that one of the things that was happening was basically like, I think people, myself included, were maybe losing these games, and then like also not really. Seeing what they could have done better, like not even like taxing in or racking in between tax triggers, but also just kind of like working, like for instance in Rich's case, working from like just a different mindset, which is like Rich already has a deck that he feels is very powerful and just like does everything that he wants it to do specifically. Right. So he might have been less open-minded.
I think that I was trying to win with the deck in a way that other people aren't. I think that for me, like, this is like my project and I want to see it succeed. And when I lose to anything, I am like, okay, my deck shouldn't lose to this. It's a thing that like the tools exist to beat all the things. How can I incorporate something that'll make me not lose to this without giving up like anything that matters anywhere else? And other people are like, I lost to a thing. I knew this was the wrong deck. I should go back to this other deck that I want a reason to play. And like with a deck that's like that complicated and that flexible, like if you don't want it to win, it's not going to.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And I think that like, my opponent in the 8th round of the champs playing that deck, they started 5-0-2. They clearly knew what they were doing with it and they wanted it to win. And then even then, assuming that they had as much experience as they did, they couldn't optimize or strategize or tacticalize, from their position to produce a win.
Sometimes stuff doesn't go your way.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Like you can do everything right.
I guess I want to.
It doesn't go your way 100% of the time.
I guess like, yeah, it was an interesting phenomena for sure that basically you were the only believer in Sam Black Tax Rack, and we were about to see that happen with Sam Black Tax Not.
What was going on with the Premodern Super Series thing or whatever it's called? Like, how do you have 8 people choosing 3 decks each, and not one of them is like, maybe I should try this tax?
We locked. I was the only player allowed to. So I was the only joiner because Francisco had some circumstances so that he lost his spot, and so I was about to choose your Tax Rack Not deck, but everyone else locked in their decks on June 13th. So they all never had a chance, and I was going to do it. But I wanted to play Burning Wish, so just like I wanted to do my cool thing, which is Burning Wish for Decree of Annihilation against Landstill, which would have been so sick. And now I don't know what's going to happen with this.
I don't think they should. Did any land tax decks get played in day one?
No land. Rich and I are the only ones with land tax, and we both didn't play it on day one. So
I don't think you should have to reroll decks. I mean, those are the rules when the tournament started.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's slightly pivot into this. Basically, the conversation right now is like, are people going to watch the PSS if we're playing in a different metagame? Pretty simple.
Of course they are.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I don't know, but isn't it more exciting?
How many people watch the PSS now? Those people love Premodern, whether or not land tax got
right, but they'd be even more excited if they.
Those people in Ephro.
Wait, Ephro's watching. Okay, anyways.
Oh yeah, I chat with Ephro a lot last year during the PSS.
Sam, did you watch? No. Darn. Can't get him to stop building CEDH decks for one night so that he can watch.
There are only 2 land tax decks in the PSS, but how many rock decks are there?
There's 3. Look, I couldn't choose the decks for everyone. I would have given everyone.
How many 12/12 decks are there? 2?
There's 3.
Yeah, I think that people were playing with boxing gloves on this one.
I mean, I pick a deck that beats that deck. Anyways, that's beside the point. Okay, so we were talking about design. We were talking about how much fun we're having. Yeah, I mean,
should we talk about what the format's going to look like?
I would love to hear your opinion. I mean, I think that you come from a very unique perspective given your interaction with the format. So yeah, what you got?
Well, so I guess, a first question is like, does this affect the metagame or any other decks, or were few enough people playing land tax that this just doesn't change anything except it removes like the land tax decks?
I can tell you that less than 10% of people play land tax decks.
Right. So presumably, like most pre-modern players play the decks that they want to play. Like at the tournament at Misty, someone noticed that there were a surprisingly large number of Terravore decks. And they're like, why are there so many Terravore decks here? And I was like, well, maybe people anticipated Landstill and they thought that like Terravore was a good strategy against it. Because like Weathered Wayfarer and Armageddon line up pretty well against like what's going on in Landstill. This conversation happened next to someone who was playing Terravore, who explained that he saw the Terravore deck and that was the thing that made him play Premodern because he thought it looked sweet.
I just think they're neat. .jpg.
Yeah. And I think that, a vast majority of Premodern deck selection is these are the cards that I remember liking from this era. I found a deck list that had them. I copied that deck list. So I guess land tax's presence or absence from the format really doesn't inform that experience in any way. So I guess we should assume that like the metagame outside of that is pretty much the same.
Well, there is like a round 5 metagame where it's a little bit more sharky, and also
Well, I think more people will play the red deck, but I don't think the people playing the red deck will necessarily be drawn from the people who used to be playing land tax decks. I think of the non-land tax players that the red deck had fallen in popularity. Now it will regain a lot of popularity because of how bad it was against the land tax decks.
It lost a lot of that popularity due to Dreadnought, though. Like Dreadnought is an actual 20%.
But the two of them together being the 2 best decks in the format other than Landstill. And then also there's Landstill players like me and Tom are just going to beat the red deck anyway.
Yeah. Do you think that land tax players will accept a deck that doesn't beat red? Okay. So
but there are other decks that they can play that
yeah.
I think as somebody who likes to play land tax, you like to do things like you like to outsmart your opponent, you like to touch your library. There are other decks that do those kinds of things.
And I think that those other decks are not necessarily like unbeatable by red.
Right. Yeah.
As someone who's like, well, I want to play like Mox Diamond and Gush, like if my deck doesn't have Enlightened Tutor, Ivory Tower, Zern Orb, like I could lose to a red deck. Like that's not hard to imagine happening.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Elves and Goblins are two very good decks that, were effectively preyed on by Oath Parfait decks. There's not an Oath deck that can really leverage Shard Phoenix well, because it would need to be a deck that like produces red mana, and if you don't, like, it's hard to produce red mana if you don't have Undiscovered Paradise and Mox Diamond and Gemstone Mine and et cetera, et cetera.
You could play like the green-blue Oath deck that roped Sam into the format, which it's almost unconditionally better than it was 3 hours ago, right? Like, I'm not saying like, oh, this is the best deck, but I was trying to make a deck that was better than Landstill, not a deck that was better than other Oath decks when I made that deck,
I mean,
right?
BK has his BK Beasts.
Yeah, so that is a blue-green Oath deck, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I was actually thinking like maybe the people who are geeked on Parfait decks, not Sandblack versions of land decks, but Parfait decks, I think they could get a lot of value out of like mulch-based scroll rack decks, and that'd be like really interesting. And like they would be like pretty bad against combo, maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe they'd be like really good against other things.
Sam, do you think that Scroll Rack is going to be a playable card in Premodern in the future?
So, the top 4 of the Misty tournament, I played against the Mulch Terravor deck, and the idea of trying to put Scroll Rack into that deck is at least somewhat interesting.
I mean, I gotta say, I don't think that Scroll Rack is gonna be good. Like, I don't know. You would need like Mulch and Gush. Like, there's just not too many. There's no card like Land Tax that just puts a large volume of cards in your hand and repeatedly.
Randy Buehler won the standard portion of U.S. Nationals in 1998 with a very fair green-white deck playing a Mulch Scroll Rack engine. So his engine was Mulch, Scroll Rack, Gaia's Blessing. He went 5-1 in standard, which was the best standard record that year. You could probably do better than Randy's deck in Premodern, but there's some pretty substantial evidence for this being capable of competing with, for example, decks that were playing Sapphire Medallion with Counterspell backup on turn 2 and turn 3, or turn 3 combo kill decks, or red decks with Fire Blast and Jackal Pup.
Well,
all of those things existed.
My baseline
standard.
I mean, my baseline thought is that the Mulch deck, as it stands, already leverages an advantage from the lands it draws. It'll just draw cycling lands or man lands or wastelands. And so, like, racking those for value isn't that exciting. And then also...
but you get to make sure that your Mulch hits more.
Yeah, but, like, honestly, playing Mox Diamond to get a bunch of dudes in play seems like a waste of the Mox Diamond.
Well, your Mulch... I mean, first you got to get your Mulch numbers up, right? So you need to get your average Mulch numbers up, and then once you're there, you're going down on the Scroll Rack cast and the Mox Diamond cast, and so it just feels like it doesn't like add up to. It doesn't feel like it adds up to an edge.
It definitely sounds like this has to be a blessing deck for it to make any sense.
No, it probably has to be a blessing deck for sure.
Right, because you need to be mulching more than a normal number of times.
But like, it seems like every time I see somebody, and I talk about Jeff Ferris on this podcast a bunch, but like, it seems to me like I own Mox Diamonds, but I'm using them to cast a Werebear. Just seems like
a foil Werebear.
Come on, man!
I just think they're neat.
I think that the reaction of "Come on, man" is a reasonable reaction to this.
All right, more breaking news.
Swords to Plowsharesable. And that is like all of the...
But a Nimble Mongoose. Nimble Mongoose.
I like a Nimble Mongoose. That's a different story.
Breaking news, the Premodern Showdown series will continue on with no changes. No rerolls, no whatever. This will be the last tournament played with land tax.
Oh man, I hope you Decree of Annihilation everybody you play against, including Rich Shea.
Oh yeah,
and that
Rich will probably have a land tax and play himself. So,
but the last taste anybody has of the card land tax is horrifying. That's what I hope.
So, speaking of Sapphire Medallion,
oh yeah,
that's where I want to go.
You've got a Gush Sapphire Medallion, like sort of blue-black Psychotog deck. Yeah, is that what you're talking about?
something in that space. Like probably I will probably like start over in making the deck list, and I haven't decided like what I want to kill people with. Like, is it Dreadnought? Is it Haunting Echoes? Is it Psychotog? Is it like Quirion Dryad?
Oh, you're talking Lanny's language now. Hey, he likes a good 66% of the cards you just named.
I like all of them. I mean, so I think Sam drafted this deck, and there was like a deep analysis in the mix, and I was like, oh yeah.
This is Lanny's language.
Deep analysis is conservative. We might be quiet specking for deep analysis.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, are you gonna intuition for deep analysis?
Yeah. Intuition.
That's how you know what you want.
Right. So like, the question is basically like, how aggressive can I afford to be with my life total in this situation? And like, do the deep analyses have to live in the sideboard? And like, we start by intuition for AK, but then like post sideboard, we just have AK and deep analysis.
Yep.
So
yep.
I think that the thing that I'm scared of personally is like, even when I want to meet up with 12-12s, I was playing Phil Nguyen 12-12 proxies. Then Lanny like guilted me into buying a set of 12-12s, and they're just next on the chopping block, right? Like this thing with land tax does not portend well for people who just bought 12-12.
Yeah.
The 12-12 was half the top 8 of LobsterCon, won last year. It was the other degenerate deck that made up the twin flames
right. So
of your degenerate deck.
I definitely think that where I go might just be cut all the stupid cantrips from Dreadnought to play Sapphire Medallion and a bunch of actual card draw spells.
Yep.
And then just like play more 12-12s.
Yeah, I like adding more mass to the deck. I think that obviously it's different. Like, the deck really wanted Gush, like has to draw Gush, right? And so if you have access to just like beefier draw spells, that might get you there. So but
maybe Sapphire Medallion's great if you go in this direction, right? So I was thinking, you had this crossover point, which is the Gush foil crossover point that links together a Sam Black based land tax deck, and this is traditional Stifle Knot deck. What if the crossover point is Stifle, and you're just like, all right, here's a deck that's
Parallax
Correction
Tide,
Dread, Stifle, Vision Charm, and here's a deck that's Parallax Tide, Stifle. And now, like, you're saying, oh, why don't we play Sapphire Medallion in this? This sounds like a hell of a Gush foil free spell.
No, I could certainly see. Like once you're in the like bigger mana space, and you're like, because again, Mox Diamond is the starting point. But when there's no land tax involved, you don't need your curve to stop at 2, because you want to play Mox Diamond and then play more mana sources and then draw more cards and play more lands and more Mox Diamonds, and just get to the point where you're like 4 mana up on your opponent because you haven't missed a land drop and you have 4 Mox Diamonds to play.
So
wait, Sam. What if to cast our flashback deep analysis, we gained 20 life from a blue enchantment?
That's a different 2-card combination.
I'm not interested in gaining 20 from a blue enchantment. I'm open to gaining 20 from a white sorcery.
All right, so here's.
Wait, hold on. What's that card? I'm too naive.
Mike?
Like a Gerard's verdict? I mean, Gerard's wisdom.
Yeah.
Gerard's wisdom. Okay. Let me pull this up for the Zoomers.
So here's my thinking on this, right? This is the opposite of the direction you went at Misty, which is like, okay, I played 2 different decks that are bad against land still, but like, maybe their peanut butter and chocolate just drips enough across the bread that I now have a good matchup, right? The way that I like the place where I was thinking about, which is a Parallax Tide Dreadnought deck, is maybe the Dreadnought half is not very good against cards like Meddling Mage or a Landstill deck, right? But the Tide half is probably fantastic. So just like, against you, I'm the Tide half, and eventually I'm going to attack you twice when you have no permanence in play. But then against the naive red players, you're just like, it's turn 1. How do you feel about a 12-12 with Days backup? Right? Like, can't be good.
All right. Well, Sam, I have a plea. We have a $500 top prize for our September 16th
You're ruining
New York
my tournament.
New York. Yeah, I'm ruining mine too.
tournament.
If Sam shows up, I'm just going to do coverage. I'm not even going to play.
You're not going to pay the entrance fee?
Yeah, I'm not going to pay the entrance fee directly to Sam's pocket, but I implore you. I think $500 will just barely scratch a plane ticket from Madison to New York City.
We can probably cover your housing costs.
We can put you up. We want to see. Just tell me that you'll think about it.
So it's the week before Vegas.
I mean, sure.
I thought your goal in life was to travel to Magic tournaments.
His goal in life is for his Magic tournaments to cover his travel.
It depends on my goals.
My goal is to play paper Magic.
Yeah.
There was a time when traveling to Magic tournaments was the most efficient way to do that.
Now it's no longer the case. Because you've got it all right in your backyard at Misty Mountain. I mean, just tell me that you'll think about it.
I will. I guarantee you that I will at least put it into a Google Flight search.
Yeah.
So I think
I'll take it.
No. Here's the whipped cream or whatever the vegetarian version of whipped cream is on
Sam, are you vegetarian or vegan?
Vegetarian, no dairy.
Okay.
All right. So whatever the processed almond milk that Sam
we have
put on
oat whipped cream actually slaps. So.
Oat whipped cream that Sam's going to put on. Here it is, Sam. As everyone knows, Sam just tricks me into playing the tournament so that he can farm me. I will make the top 8 of the tournament. So your step function to the 500 prize is like literally you have a freebie in the top 8, right? So
if I decided to go, I'm assuming that I have more freebies than that.
Oh, I mean, I'm a straight up freebie. I'm a freebie in the top 8.
Yeah,
I'm not like freebie in the Swiss.
Yeah, your only opponent might actually just be Osip Levidovic at that point. Because
if you just make sure that you still give him Fluctuator, and it doesn't sound like an issue.
So here's the thing: Osip begged me for the replenish cards, but Lanny said he needed them for the PSS. So I said I can't give you replenish. I'm supposed to give these cards to Lanny. And then, I gave him a few days. I was just like, tell me, I have like basically every deck built, right? Tell me what you want. And he's just like, I'll just play Fluctuator again. But he wanted to play Replenish.
Well, Jeff can hook him up with the Replenish, and then Sam will show up with the Replenish beater. Sounds like
Sam does not need to tune.
Sounds like the Sapphire Medallion.
He's not a Mike Hunting.
I'm going to have blue cards in my deck. I don't think I'm going to have a bad Replenish mashup.
Yeah.
Well.
Sam, this has been delightful for me. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead and plug your stuff, and we'll sign off.
All right. If there are any listeners left who have made it through this rambling conversation about a million different constructed formats,
none of which include Premodern,
who are also interested in limited, I have a limited podcast. If you liked hearing my take on Magic. The Limited podcast is exclusively that. I am the sole host. I never have any guests. I just talk about...
Is it shade? Are we getting shaded?
No. I think podcasts with... I listen to podcasts that have multiple people. My podcast is designed with a very specific goal in mind, which is to give me a place to, as efficiently as I can, tell people how to draft a particular archetype each week. That's all it does. It's very... straight and to the point. I, as a listener, often prefer the more conversational, higher nonsense, more fun podcasts. But for those listeners, the listeners that I target with my podcast are limited tryhards who really want to just learn how they can win more
gems
matches, and so. If that describes you and you've listened to all of this and you don't know about the podcast, so maybe that's somebody, check out Drafting Archetypes.
Look, it's non-zero. I guarantee you it's non-zero. I have Sam Black to thank for my unlimited gem blank bankroll in Magic Arena. I'm sure many other people do.
Yeah,
so definitely check out. Yeah, definitely check out Drafting Archetypes anywhere you find podcasts.
I was a below average player. Could not 3-0 an F&M. I became an invincible player. So comical win rates. Somebody's like, oh, what's your win rate? 93%. You're like, shut up. I'm like, here's the stats. I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, never lose. All I did was one not even Sam sent me a spreadsheet, and then I asked him to send me another one for Crimson Vow, and he wouldn't. And so I had like a 47% Crimson Vow win rate. But for Midnight Hunt,
yeah, so
93%.
Unfortunately, this has nothing to do with my podcast whatsoever, and it's simply the power of a little help using 17 lands. But
I drafted more than one archetype. I drafted Black-Red once because I opened Flurry. But that was the one time.
Right.
Sam, can't wait to see what you come up with next in this brand new world of Premodern. Can't wait to see you continue cooking and see EDH. Maybe one day, Mike and I will get hooked into that.
So on that note, I also write some articles. They get posted on Hipsters of the Coast or Eminence. And some of those articles are about CDH, but also some of them are about Premodern, and also some of them are about whatever I feel like writing about at the time, which could be really anything. And if you are interested in my thoughts on could be anything, you could follow me on Twitter at Samuel H. Black. And if that is insufficient, Sam, for you, you could also watch my stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Samuel H. Black.
And the Discord.
You also have a YouTube channel. I watched you play Constructed.
I do also have a YouTube channel. I should update it more than I do. It is largely stream recaps, but every now and then I'm like, oh, I have like some ideas about some constructed decks, and I don't want to play those on stream, so I guess I'll put them on YouTube. So I also have a youtube.com/@Samuel H. Black.
Love it. Can't get enough. Okay, well, this has been Michael J., Laney Huang, and Sam Black. Thank you for listening to an epic one. We'll put it at that. Love Spike Colony. That's our new sign-off.
Love Spike Colony. Bye. Thanks so much, Sam.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Game over.